Hello, 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 hello. Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I hope everybody can see me okay. And we are live. Now, this is a special one tonight, folks. So it is. It's actually a very serious one tonight, and I think it's one of the most serious nights we have ever had. This tonight, we are live on Facebook. Tonight we're also live on the Chatterhouse YouTube channel, and also as well we are live on Auntie Lillian's channel as well. So we're beaming out to the world. So we are, because I find that this is a very, very important one tonight, and I just wanted to get the message out as much as I can. By the way, folks, if you are in, please comment so I can give you a wee mention. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to YouTube first, because there's a couple up there. Sam's there. Our Sam Davison says hello to everybody. How you, Sam? And also the bouncer himself, our Killian's over on YouTube as well. Right, so let's go into the chatter house, because we have a lot to get through tonight, and I just want to see who's all in. Hang on, let's go back to the very beginning. Right. Okay, straight through the door was our Carrie Ferguson, my local historian. Says, hello, hello, I'm in the background doing housework again, but I'm here. She always says that, and then she always chitters away. AJ has just appeared. So he has on YouTube, he said he had visitors tonight. He had unannounced visitors, but he just says it was a planned visit and they're away. That's what I like to hear. Right, Jackie McFarlane saying, as if one day I should become a singer with a Spanish bum, is in through the door. Our Miss Chatterhouse herself, Michelle McGrogan's through the door as well. Our Phyllis Morris is in as well. Catherine Playfair is in as well. Nice to see you, Catherine. Our Sam is now over on Facebook as well. Phyllis is saying hello to Sam. Our Kathy Ling's in as well. She's saying evening all. Sam's now saying hello to Phyllis. Sam says hello, Stuart. How you, Sam, love? Jackie McFarlane saying hello to me. How you, Jackie? And our Tracy Wee Wees is in as well, and Kathy Ling is saying hello to Michelle, and Tracy's saying good evening. I'm sure there will be more will come in tonight, so there will, because it is a big sort of important one. Okay, right. So, as I said, folks, this is a very, very serious one tonight. I think it's one of the serious nights we've ever had. And there's nothing worse, when you hear on the news and stuff about people going missing. I couldn't imagine in my life having someone out of my family going missing. They're not knowing, waiting for the phone to ring. Tim for Life has just arrived. How you, Tim? Just not knowing what's going on. Wondering if it's a child, if it's an adult. It doesn't matter who it is. Just not knowing where they are. It must be the most frightening thing ever. Before we show you tonight what we're going to, before I show you tonight what we're going to do, I'm going to read you out a few statistics. Now, bear in mind that these are statistics, but we're talking about people here, okay? Someone is reported missing in the UK every 90 seconds. That's every 90 seconds someone is reported missing. How many people go missing each year? Uh, Missing people, over 170,000 people reported missing. Out of 170,000 people reported missing, 96,000 are adults and nearly 75,000 are children. Missing incidents of the nearly 350,000 reported incidents. Nearly 130,000 incidents relate to missing adults. Over 216,000 relate to missing children. Now, children who are looked after, now that's probably children who are maybe being fostered, children who are maybe in care, are at high risk of being reported missing. 1 in 10 of looked after children are reported missing, compared to 1 in 200 children. Looked after children who are reported missing will be reported on average 6 times. It's unbelievable, folks. Hi, Charlie. Nice to see you. Colleen says I agree, and especially with no closures. No. So there you go, folks. You know what I mean? These are people. Every day, every 90 seconds, someone goes missing. Isn't that unbelievable? Could you imagine being that person if it's someone belonging to you? Hello, David. Nice to see you. Could you imagine being a family member of someone who goes missing? It must be the worst thing ever. Right, so what we're going to do tonight, folks, is I have got 2 cases here, right? And I am going to play you these videos of these cases, but you're not going to watch them on your own. I am going to watch them along with you, and I'll probably pause it and whatever, and we'll go through it, and we'll talk about it, and we'll discuss it, right? Now, the first one is about a guy. We're going to Dublin, first of all. We're going to start on this side, right? And this guy is called Trevor Dealey. Now, Trevor Dealey, very briefly, because this is going to tell you the story, was basically at his work's Christmas dinner. And basically, he went missing after the Christmas dinner, and he's never been seen since. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this story of Trevor Dealey. We're going to have a break. And then when we come back, we're going to look at another one. And this second one is a really, really strange one. This second one is really, really strange, as too is this first one. So let me get the video up. As I say, I'm going to be here too, watching it with you. And if you feel as if you need to comment or whatever, please do so. And let me know your opinions. So let me get the video up. I'm always doing this with do reactions, but I never did it live before, so here we go. It's going to be good. Right, okay. Yeah, this is going to start playing immediately, so I'll pause it. Right, so this is the video. I'll go small, folks, by the way. And this is the story of Trevor Dealey in Dublin and how he went missing. And as I say, as the video is being played, I will pause and react. You can comment and tell me what you think. Okay? So here we go. So what do we say? Right, so here, look at me, I'm in the corner. So here we go. Here is the story of Trevor Dealey.
This is the last known image of Trevor Dealey. The 22-year-old vanished without a trace after walking past the security camera in Ballsbridge, Dublin.
We're particularly appealing to anybody that may have been in the Haddington Road, Wilton Terrace area on the early hours of the morning of December the 8th, 2000. Particularly the unknown male as depicted in the CCTV footage.
It's December 8, 2000. Eminem has released the song Stan, and The Grinch is showing at movie theatres. The controversial election between Al Gore and George Bush is still being played out in court. Meanwhile, in Ireland, taxi drivers are striking due to government plans to deregulate the industry. Outgoing US President Bill Clinton is due to visit the country in just 4 days. In Dublin, 22-year-old Trevor Dealey is at a staff Christmas party in Buck Whaley's nightclub on Lower Leeson Street. As they chat and drink, his co-workers have no idea that their night out is about to become part of a mystery that will stump investigators and bewilder an entire nation for more than 2 decades. That night, Dealey was facing a 30-minute walk back to his apartment. It was raining, windy and cold. There were also no taxis around due to the strike. When the IT worker left Buckwaley's at around 3:30 a.m, he walked to his workplace at the Bank of Ireland Asset Management Department, which was just around the corner. It is likely that he stopped by the building to pick up an umbrella. Deely reached his workplace at around 3:35. As he headed towards the side gate, he walked past a man who had been standing outside the main entrance for roughly 30 minutes. The man, who remains unidentified, is commonly referred to as the Man in Black due to his dark clothing. The pair had a very short conversation while Deely was waiting for the gate to open. Moments later, Deely went inside the courtyard and closed the gate, leaving the Man in Black by himself. Inside the building, Deely logged into his PC but didn't do anything of note. One popular theory is that he may have been checking his emails because he didn't have an internet connection in his apartment. Before leaving, he had a casual conversation with a co-worker who was working the night shift. At around
Right, folks, just want to point out to start off with, right? He bumped into someone outside his work, okay? Now, if that person had have upset him or threatened him or caused any altercation whatsoever, he would have mentioned that in his work, but he didn't. He went in, he opened his emails, he had a conversation with someone in work, he actually had a coffee with someone, and he left. So he never mentioned that person. So obviously that person didn't cause him any harm, didn't threaten him, didn't cause an altercation. So what was that person doing there?
4 a.m, Deely left holding an umbrella. By that stage, the Man in Black was gone. After fixing his umbrella, Deely headed east along Wilton Terrace. He then crossed McCartney Bridge, turned a corner and walked east along Haddington Road. It was here that a bank security camera captured the last known footage of him. What happened next remains a mystery, as no trace of Deely or his belongings have ever been found. Deely failed to show up for work the following day. Although this was out of character, his manager presumed that he was sleeping off a hangover from the night before. On the weekends, Deely sometimes went back to his hometown of Naas. However, on this occasion, his parents weren't expecting him home, as he had signalled his intent to stay in Dublin. As a result, nobody noticed that he had gone missing. Alarm bells didn't begin to ring until the following Monday, when he failed to show up for work yet again. After asking around, Deely's manager learned that nobody had talked to him since the night of the Christmas party. Concerned, he sent the following email to the HR department. "We have a problem here. This guy is not to be found. What should we do?" At that point, the bank contacted Deely's parents, who immediately sprung into action. The area around Haddington Road was checked for CCTV footage. Unfortunately, 4 days had passed before anyone realised that he was missing. This complicated matters, as most camera systems back then stored their footage on VCR tapes. These tapes were reused and recorded over every couple of days. The only business that still had footage from the night in question was the Bank of Ireland building on Haddington Road.
So there you go once again, folks. In the olden days, CCTV was all on videotape. However, CCTV on videotape was deleted after a certain length of time and re-recorded over, so there was no more record of what had happened to him.
These days, the building is occupied by a pizza restaurant called Milano. The security footage from Haddington Road showed that a dark figure appeared to be following Deely from behind. Initially, it was presumed that this man was the same Man in Black who was hanging around Deely's workplace. This led to theories that someone was following the 22-year-old from afar. However, in December of 2023, it was revealed that the dark figure on Haddington Road had been identified and ruled out. It was also made clear that he was not the same man who had been standing outside Deely's workplace. That man has yet to be identified. After leaving his workplace, Deely used his Nokia 1610 to call his friend Glenn Cullen, who lived in Naas. The call was made at 4:06 a.m, which was roughly 4 minutes after he had left his workplace. At the time, he was most likely walking along Wilton Terrace. The call went to voicemail as Cullen was asleep and had left his phone charging downstairs. Dealey and Cullen had tried calling each other earlier that night, but they couldn't hear each other due to the noise. At the time, Dealey was at a Christmas party, while Cullen was in a pub in Naas. The voicemail was trivial, and there was no indication that Dealey felt concerned. In his message, he acknowledged that he had missed Cullen's call earlier that night. He then said that he was heading back to his apartment and that he would talk to him tomorrow. This was the last time that anyone heard from Dealey. His Nokia 1610, which was a popular model at the time, has never been recovered. An Irish Times article said that Dealey's sister, Michelle Dealey, called her brother multiple times that weekend and that his phone rang out. At the time, she didn't think much of it, as she did not know that he was missing. This point is often brought up when people discuss this case. However, they usually fail to mention the lack of certainty surrounding this statement. Certain networks will play a ringing tone while they are searching for the other phone. This may be significant, as Michelle was in London when she made the calls. In other words, she was making an international call to a phone on a foreign network. There are
Which, as you know, folks, because obviously he's in Dublin and she's in London, Dublin's call classed as a Roman call, so obviously that's what that means. Killian has just said here, unfortunately, CCTV quality from 2000 until present hasn't got any better either, which is still a factor that hinders cases. So we'll carry on.
no reports that anyone else called Dealey's phone and heard it ringing out. Another piece of the puzzle is Dealey's decision to walk up Haddington Road. Dealey lived in an apartment at the Renor complex in St James's Court on Serpentine Avenue. Haddington Road was not the quickest route back to his apartment. If he wanted to take the shortest route, he would have walked along Pembroke Road. Although Pembroke Road is quicker, humans do not operate like Google Maps. Sometimes we favour routes that are slightly longer due to other factors. Dealey was a smoker and there was a 24-hour shop somewhere along Bath Avenue. Considering he did not light up after leaving his workplace, it is possible that he was fresh out. Smokers will usually ensure that they have enough cigarettes for the following morning.
Absolutely.
Therefore, it is plausible that he wanted to buy a pack before he returned home. Dealey visited a woman in Anchorage, Alaska a few days before his disappearance. He had met the woman through friends while she was in Dublin. It seems as though he had a romantic interest in her, as he was willing to take a lengthy flight by himself to visit her hometown. However, it appears as though she didn't feel the same way, as she made excuses about being too busy when he emailed her about the prospect of him flying to Anchorage. Despite these excuses, Dealey remained undeterred. According to the Gardaí, this led to a difficult situation where he appeared out of nowhere, uninvited. Like most people, I once believed that the man in black outside Dealey's workplace was the key to this case. However, the identification of the person on Haddington Road has changed my mind. It is now clear that the person on Haddington Road was not the man in black following Dealey from behind. There is now no evidence that Dealey crossed paths with the man in black after their initial conversation. Of course, it is possible that they did encounter each other somewhere along Dealey's route home. However, it seems far less likely. One popular theory is that the man in black was part of some targeted operation and that Dealey may have been the victim of a tiger kidnapping. Personally, I highly doubt this. The man was hanging around the entrance of the bank for 30 minutes. He also appeared to make a phone call at one point. Taxi drivers were on strike that night. Therefore, he may have been waiting for someone to pick him up. Dealey was a low-level IT worker who did not have access to important information. Furthermore, the asset management agency deals with stocks and land, not cash. This makes Dealey an unlikely target for criminal gangs. I also doubt that someone involved in such an operation would expose themselves by hanging around the front of the building. The footage shows that Dealey and the man initially ignored each other. The conversation between the pair seemed very brief, and Dealey's body language does not suggest that he felt threatened. In fact, it appears as though he ignored the man in black after they spoke. Dealey did not mention the man or their conversation to his co-worker on the night shift. He seemed in good form and was more interested in talking about the Christmas party. In my opinion, this indicates that the man in black talked to Dealey about something trivial. For example, he may have asked him for a cigarette or spare change. The man in question seems intoxicated, as his head drops for extended periods. At one point, he leans against the wall. When Dealey finally opens the gate, the man reacts very sluggishly and just stands there. Given the time of night and the location, I believe that it's far more likely that the man in black was intoxicated and waiting for someone to pick him up. The CCTV footage wasn't released until it was enhanced in 2017, which was
What?
nearly 17 years after the interaction took place. This man may be completely unaware that internet.
So did you hear that, folks? This CCTV wasn't released until 17 years later. What? What is going on?
Sleuths have spent the past few years dissecting his every movement. The Gardaí found no trace of Dealey when they searched the Grand Canal Basin and the River Dodder. Although they wanted to drain the Grand Canal Basin, they were unable to do so because it would impact the structural integrity of surrounding buildings. Dealey's case is extremely fluid, as we know nothing about his movements after 4/14. Therefore, we can only speculate about his motives and which route he took. It is difficult to pick apart the logic of a man who is walking home drunk at 4 a.m., especially in such weather conditions. Anyone who claims to know the answer is only fooling themselves, as life is full of rash decisions and chance events. Suicide is a relatively popular theory due to the Anchorage situation. However, Dealey seemed to be in good spirits that night, and he did tell his friend that he would speak to him the following day. Having said that, suicide isn't always preceded by warnings. People who suffer from such thoughts can act on them very abruptly. Alcohol can also act as a trigger. Dealey staggered to his left in the CCTV footage. His co-worker on the night shift said that it was clear that he had been drinking, but that he didn't seem too drunk. People who are intoxicated can feel more alert in social situations because they are engaged in conversation. In other words, there is something to keep them focused. However, that alertness can fade away once they begin a long walk home by themselves. If Dealey did accidentally drown, then it is likely that he staggered while he was crossing a bridge over the River Dodder. On the night in question, the river had swelled due to heavy rainfall. The wall on Ball's Bridge on Pembroke Road seems too high for someone to fall over it. There are two other bridges that he may have walked across, depending on which route he took. One is by Lansdowne Road, while the other crosses Bath Avenue to the north. The River Dodder becomes tidal by these bridges. Furthermore, the walls on these bridges were relatively low until recent times. If this did happen, then he may have been swept down to the River Liffey, which flows out into Dublin Bay. Of course, there is no evidence to support this theory, as none of Dealey's belongings were ever recovered. The next obvious theory is foul play. It is doubtful that someone attacked him on the side of a road in a busy city and then moved his body without anyone witnessing anything. Carrying dead weight is not an easy task.
Sorry to stop us again, folks, but I just want to say something else. They said, there's no way that nobody could attack him. And just to remind you, there was no taxis, so everybody was probably out walking. So there was probably a lot of people about who would have seen something or whatever. But no, it just vanished.
Dealey was about 6'2", and there was still a considerable amount of people around as the Christmas party season was in full swing.
Yeah.
If he was attacked in public, then you'd have to imagine that the offender had immediate access to a vehicle. Either that, or the attack took place within touching distance of the River Dodder. Otherwise, they would have likely left him there. Another possibility is that he was the victim of a hit and run. The taxi strike and bad weather may have enticed some people to get behind the wheel while drunk. This was also 6 years before random breathalyzer tests became a thing. For example, they may have initially placed him in the vehicle with the plan to take him to a hospital, only to later realise that he had succumbed to his injuries. There was no forensic evidence that a hit and run took place. However, Dealey wasn't reported missing for 4 days.
4
The
days.
city was also preparing for the upcoming visit of US President Bill Clinton. In that period, street sweepers may have cleaned up any broken glass or personal belongings. Another plausible theory is that Dealey went back to a private residence. Depending on his route home, he may have crossed paths with a number of dubious characters. If he did agree to go back to someone's house or apartment, then it is possible that something happened and that the occupants covered it up. For example, death by misadventure or an argument that became violent. In 2017, an informant alleged that Dealey had been shot and buried by an organised crime figure who had been operating in the area where the 22-year-old disappeared. The informant said that the murder took place during a chance encounter. Although the Gardaí searched a plot of land in Chapelizod, no trace of Dealey or his belongings were found. It is unclear whether this informant is a viable witness or not. However, investigators did note that he didn't seem to have an ulterior motive. He also showed no interest in collecting the €100,000 reward. As you can see, there is an almost endless list of possibilities. All we know for sure is that a 6'2" man walked up Haddington Road and seemingly disappeared into thin air. Due to the passage of time, it seems as though the only hope is that someone discovers Dealey's remains by chance, or that someone with a conscience comes forward with a viable piece of information.
Okay, folks, so there you go. Carrie says there we're talking about the CCTV. How the hell did the cops not release it for 17 years? That could have helped if it had been released earlier in the case. And Carrie says this is why there's so much that could have happened and no evidence for any of it. Wendy says it's just crazy. You know, it really is crazy. It's just mad. Carrie says the informant could have a point. Look at those who were disappeared from here. It took decades to find some of the people, and there's still some haven't even been found. Just to let you know, folks, I know we are in the north of Ireland or whatever, but in case somebody's watching this back on YouTube, you can contact the missing persons uh, website there, and their hotline is their number is 116. It's going to come up again here. The missing persons contact number is 116000. Their website is www.missingpeople.org.uk, or contact the police on 101. It's just unbelievable. It really, really is. This is happening all the time. Now, just to let you know, what I'm gonna do. That's what Wendy says is poor family. You know, 22, don't know where he is, never been seen. Well, look, folks, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna just do about a 4 minute break here with a wee bulletin of other recent people from here. And then I'm going to come back. Tim for Life says, I just can't imagine being in this situation as a family member. I hope I never am. Well, I'm just going to play you another wee video here of me. Then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you an even more strange one, folks. I just can't get my head around this one. It's actually quite maybe a famous one, maybe some of you have heard of, but it's strange. So I'll see you in 4 minutes. I will see you in 4 minutes. currently missing. This is only. Hi, folks. How are yous? This is a quick bulletin showing a few people who are currently missing. This is only a few of many folks. So please pay attention, and if you can help, it would be greatly appreciated, please. First of all, today, folks, I want to talk to you. This is police in Korean are appealing for information in relation to missing person Kaylee Jones. A 16-year-old female reported missing from Mullingar, Westmeath. She was reportedly last seen in the Port Stuart area. Anyone with information, please contact 101. That's the police at 101, reference number 1263-18082. That's phone the police on 101 and quote reference 1263-18082. Okay, right, and the next one I want to highlight is this is police are growing concerned for the whereabouts of Jason Irwin. Jason was last seen in the area of Craigavon Area Hospital on Friday the 1st of August 2025 at approximately 4:45 p.m. Jason is described in his mid-30s and likely to be wearing dark clothing and a woolly hat. Jason's beard is heavier now than the photo. If you believe you have seen Jason or have any information as to where Jason's whereabouts, please contact the police on 101 quoting reference 1364. That's 101 quoting reference 1364. Okay, folks, so we're going across the water now. So we are. We'll just get this one up. Let's get Jason off there and bring this one up. Okay, this is Ryan, who is 14. Ryan was last seen in Knoll, which is in Bristol, on August the 12th, 2025. He's also got links to Bristol and South Gloucestershire as well. If anybody has seen Ryan or anybody has any information on Ryan, once again, please contact 101 quoting reference 5225 225 888. That's phone 101 quoting reference 5225 225 888. He's only 14, folks, so if anybody can help, it'll be greatly appreciated. As I say, folks, this is a small few of many. As you have probably learned by now, every 90 seconds in the UK, someone goes missing. And we have to remember, folks, they are not just a statistic. These are people. These are people who have family. These are people who have got loved ones, friends, who are worried, sick about them. So we really need your help. It would be really greatly appreciated if you can help. Thank you so much for listening. So there you go, folks. Catherine just said here, on a Korean page, the wee girl has been found safe 4 hours ago. With me being from there. Oh, that's good news. Catherine, thank you so much for letting us know. Thank you so much. I actually recorded that earlier on today. So thank you so much for letting us know. Kai says, oh, that's fantastic. I'm so glad she was found safe. It's just unbelievable. My heart's breaking here. Even the thought of this, it's just awful. It really is. Okay, folks, so let's go from one extreme to another, and this is weird. This is weird. This is the story of Stephen Clark. Now, Stephen Clark, I, I'll tell you the story about him. Again, I'm going to be here at the side, but I want your opinion on a couple of things about this case, folks. So I do, because there's a couple of things which happened, and I want to know what you would do in this situation. One thing in particular, and when it happens, I will pause the video and ask you. Right, so Stephen has been missing for quite a while now, and it's a really strange circumstances, really strange. So I'm going to bring the video up here. Again, I'm going to be at the side. There's David over on YouTube now. I'm going to be at the side here, and we'll watch this. This is strange. This is strange. So here we go. What do we say? Oh, there's me small now. What do we say? Where's Stephen? There he's there. Okay. Here we go.
23-year-old British man Stephen Charles Clark entered a public bathroom on a cold winter day in 1992 and was never seen again. Despite extensive searches and multiple reported sightings, not a single trace of Stephen was ever found. Welcome to Dark Enigma. This is the story of the disappearance of Stephen Clark. Stephen was born in Colchester, England in 1969 to parents Charles and Doris. Aged just 2, he was hit by a truck, leaving him with life-changing injuries. Stephen would spend a month in a coma, and the accident would leave him with a pronounced limp, learning difficulties, and permanent damage to his left arm. Speaking about that time, Doris Clark said, quote, "It must have been very hard for him. He was so different from the little boy before the accident to how he was when he came home. So we just worked as hard as we could to get him better." It was around this time that Stephen's younger sister and only sibling, Victoria, was born. The Clark family moved frequently throughout Stephen's life, spending time living in Edinburgh, Cambridge, Guildford, London, and even 10 years in the town of Benoni in South Africa. It was in 1992 that the Clark family moved to the seaside village of Marske, Yorkshire, in the north-east of England. Doris and Charles were born, met, and had briefly served as police officers in South Tyneside, also in the northeast of England. For them, the return to Marske was like returning home. At this time, Stephen was in early adulthood. After struggling for years to find a job and facing many rejections, he was supported onto a work training scheme by the Rathbone Society, an organisation which helped disabled people into employment. Stephen really grew from this experience, winning an Apprentice of the Year award and even featuring in a video promoting the Rathbone Society.
By the way, folks, this is actually Stephen. This isn't an actor. What's coming up here? This is actually Stephen.
Using the yellow pages and the business directory.
Stephen's parents say that though he hated his disability, he still took life in his stride. He loved socialising and enjoyed music and bowling. He was a well-known regular in the village pub. Like many parents of disabled young people, the Clarks worked to find a balance between protecting their son and allowing him the freedom to explore the limits of his independence.
Absolutely.
It was a bank holiday Monday after Christmas. Charles Clark left home at around 2 p.m. and made the 10-mile drive to the Riverside Stadium, home of local football club Middlesbrough, who were set to play Crystal Palace that day. The plan had originally been for Stephen to go along with Charles to the match, though Stephen pulled out at the last minute after his dad told him that he would have to pay for himself on this occasion. Charles still has the matchday program he purchased that day.
By the way, folks, in case you're wondering what that's about, Stephen was actually known to be a bit tight with his money. He liked to keep his money, and he thought his dad was actually going to pay for the ticket, but his dad just couldn't keep up with it all the time, and he said to Stephen that he had to pay for it himself. Of course, Stephen then wouldn't go. He didn't go. He said he wasn't going to go, so that's what happened there. Just to explain that to you.
And though it is believed highly likely that Charles did attend the game that day, police weren't able to conclusively verify this. Doris Clark walked daily and would often be accompanied by her son. At around 3 p.m. that day, Doris and Stephen set out from their home on a 45-minute beachfront walk from Marske to Saltburn Beach and Pier.
Some walk.
Victoria Clark no longer lived at the family home at this time and wasn't present on the 28th. Doris and Stephen arrived at a busier than usual Saltburn. The bank holiday weekend had drawn visitors to the beach's packed pier and promenade. Not long after arriving, Doris and Stephen made the decision to head back home while it was still light out. Before setting off, the pair headed for the public bathroom on the promenade. As Doris made her way to the women's bathroom, which adjoined the men's, she couldn't have known that this was the last time she, or anyone else, would see her son. Doris exited the bathroom and waited for Stephen on the promenade. Stephen didn't emerge. Assuming that her son had already left the bathroom, Doris headed back in the direction home to Marske, believing that she would likely catch up with Stephen along the way.
Okay, folks, now this is where I want to ask you a question here. Now, I am not running anybody down, I'm not questioning anybody, and I'm not being accusatory, but if you were in that situation where you were at the toilet with your son, yes, he's disabled, yes, he's an adult, yes, he was 23. Now, if it was me, I think I would have either... Like they said it was busy that day. They said there was a lot of people about. Would you not have got someone to go in and see if he was all right? I think I would have. You know, say if I'd have been a lady and I obviously didn't want to go in. Yes, she said that she didn't want to go in because she didn't want to embarrass him. He would have been absolutely mortified because after all, he's an adult. Yes, that's fine. That's okay. But for me, I would say... I would have sent someone in. You know, I would have got someone to go in. Wendy said absolutely. Jackie says, yes, I agree. Charlie says, I would be in the toilet looking for him. And Tracy says, yes, definitely. Killian says her story doesn't really add up. It doesn't make, I don't 100% agree with you there. Makes sense. And he agrees with me. But if that was me, if I was a lady, Charlie said, I'd just, even if it was a lady or not, what if he had a fail? What if he had a fail and hit his head in the toilet or anything? But she came out and she assumed that he had walked home. So she just left the toilet. And that's what I find hard to understand. Tracy says, I would have been away to FC waiting and getting someone. Carrie says, I think I'd have sent someone in even just to come out and say to me, yes, he's in there. But then your head works funny when you're in panic. And Charlie says, even opening the door and calling his name. And Killian says, makes sense. Yeah, this is what I don't understand. But it gets stranger, folks. It really, really gets stranger. So let's continue. By the way, I'm just going to nip off to get a drink here. So I'll let you play this for a minute. Hold on.
Asked years later why she didn't enter the bathroom to check on her son, Doris said that Stephen was a grown man and that he would have been, quote, mortified. Upon her return, Doris found that Stephen wasn't home. By the time that Charles arrived home after 5 p.m, Stephen still hadn't returned. At around 6:30 p.m, the Clarks called the police and the search for Stephen began. It's unknown how long it took police to respond to Stephen's missing persons report. In the meantime, Charles, unable to trace his son's steps back to the promenade on foot due to high tide, drove to Saltburn. There he walked the length of the promenade, shining a torch and shouting for Stephen. After not finding him, Charles continued to drive around the town, looking for his son. A search of his belongings showed that Stephen had taken nothing with him on the walk that day, other than the clothes he wore and his coat. His glasses, wallet and watch were all where he had left them at home. Stephen's bank and savings accounts were untouched, and it was later found that he had not claimed the £1,000 prize money that accompanied his Apprentice of the Year award. When police did join the search, Marsk Beach and the surrounding cliffs were combed. Radio, newspaper and TV appeals were made locally. Police records show that there were no reports of a disturbance at the beach that day, and not a single person has ever come forward claiming to have seen Stephen in the vicinity of Marsk Beach. There were, however, 2 reported sightings of Stephen in other locations. The first, 2 days after his vanishing on the 30th of December in the nearby town of Redcar. This sighting was reported by a woman who knew Stephen. A relative of the unnamed woman worked at the local bowling club, and she knew that the Clarks were members. The woman claimed to have seen Stephen exiting a public footpath leading away from the beach through her apartment window. The woman stated that Stephen was in the company of a bespectacled man aged in his 50s, wearing a long grey coat. Police were not convinced by this sighting, as, after visiting the woman's property, they found the distance from her living room window to the area that she believed she saw Stephen to be too far. It would also have been dark at the time of the alleged sighting. The second sighting reportedly occurred in Redcar on the 14th of January, 17 days after Stephen's vanishing. This sighting was reported by a local man who Charles and Stephen had met and were on friendly terms with from the local pub. The man, known as Stan, claimed to have seen Stephen walking by the Market Square and Clock Tower in Redcar town centre. Stan claimed to have bumped into Stephen near the clock tower while on the way to meet his wife at a bus stop after work. Stan stated that the pair exchanged niceties and both walked away. Not knowing that Stephen was missing at that time, Stan only reported the encounter to police weeks later. Bizarrely, Stan changed his statement years later in 1999.
Why? Why? If he was up close to him, and he was talking to him, and he knew him, he didn't report it for weeks, and then he changed his statement. Why? Why?
And instead claimed to have seen a man who walked like Stephen around 30 yards away in the town centre, but that he did not see the man's face or talk to him.
So first of all, he spoke to him, he had a conversation with him, he asked him how he was, he didn't report it 2 weeks later, he changed the story that he only seen a man from a distance who talked and walked like Stephen and couldn't see his face. What's going on?
Neither of these 2 sightings could be verified. As the weeks passed by, Charles and Doris extended their search to nearby towns and eventually to London St Cross. When questioned by police, the pair claimed that their son's behaviour had not changed in the run-up to his disappearance, and that no argument or family dispute had occurred around that time. When asked, Charles and Doris also denied ever having hit their son or lashed out in frustration at his behaviour or due to his physical limitations. With not a single trace of Stephen having been found, his case would quickly begin to turn cold. Speaking in 1997, Mrs. Clark said her son had, quote, vanished in a puff of smoke with no warning or even a word of goodbye.
Developments.
There were dozens of reported sightings of people matching Stephen's description down the years. His image featured in missing persons campaigns and was printed on milk cartons. Stephen's case was even featured in a BBC programme about the missing, titled The Day They Disappeared. Despite the continued search, it wouldn't be until 5 years later that a new lead emerged. In September of 1997, Cleveland police received an anonymous letter from a person claiming to have important information in Stephen's case. Although police have never revealed the exact contents of the letter, They did release an image of the envelope alongside an appeal for the letter writer to come forward in the hopes that someone might recognise the handwriting. The letter writer would remain anonymous for 23 years until an
What?
apparent break in the case. On September 14th, 2020, Charles and Doris Clark were arrested on suspicion of murder following a case review by the Cleveland and North Yorkshire Cold Case Unit.
They were
Given no
arrested.
warning that the police were seeking their arrest, the couple were taken to the station and interviewed separately over the course of several hours. Charles and Doris were asked to each recount their version of events of the day Stephen went missing. Doris defiantly insisted that she was telling the truth, to which police claimed she was just making up a story. Police asked Doris what she and Stephen spoke about during their final walk together. Doris couldn't recall. Doris was also asked if her husband Charles would keep a secret in order to protect her. Doris denied this. Mrs. Clark would later allege that the police were aggressive and overly pushy. She said that they accused her of being violent, controlling, and a murderer. They asked her to reveal where Stephen's body is so that he could be laid to rest. Police would allege that the Clarks had repeatedly changed their story, but did not specify which details had allegedly been changed. While the interrogation was ongoing, the Clark family home was searched and a forensic archaeological dig was carried out on the back garden. A wooded area opposite the family home was also combed. And so
Just to remind you, folks, that these two people here were arrested, and just to remember that these two, his parents, were originally both in the police force originally themselves, but they weren't in it for very, very long. Carrie says here, you remember what you spoke about. Surely it would be embellished in your mind. It's just weird. It's just is really strange. And told you this is a strange one. We'll continue.
Saltburn Beach and Cliffs was again scoured. Doris and Charles were released on bail while police continued with their investigation. 9 days later, a witness came forward in response to a renewed appeal for information by police, claiming to have seen Stephen walking alone by local pub The Ship Inn on the afternoon of the 28th, while it was still daylight at between 3 and 4 p.m. Police do seem to place some credence in this sighting, though it has never been explicitly stated that the person seen near Marske High Street that afternoon was Stephen. Though, if it was Stephen, this sighting places him very close to home and would indicate that he did leave Saltburn Beach alone that afternoon, likely with every intention of heading home. Shortly after this, police released a redacted version of the 1997 anonymous letter and once again appealed for the writer to come forward. Days after this, and 74 days after their initial arrest, the Clarks were released from police bail but informed that they still remained under investigation. On day 80, the anonymous letter writer finally came forward. It was revealed by police at this time that the writer had claimed that Stephen had been murdered and that they knew who was responsible. Though the writer has never been identified, it was disclosed that the woman did know the Clarks, but that she had no evidence to back up her claim. 151 days after their arrest, Charles and Doris were formally cleared by police of involvement in their son's vanishing. During their ordeal, the Clarks partook in an ITV documentary titled Accused of Murdering Our Son, The Stephen Clark Story, featuring ex-detective Mark Williams Thomas.
Okay, folks, just want to reiterate that his parents were totally cleared of Stephen's murder, and also as well this documentary that they're talking about, you can actually view it on YouTube because I've actually watched it. Basically, it was an ex-detective who spent a certain amount of time with the parents, and he was convinced in the end that they didn't do it. They also appeared on This Morning as well, after being accused and stuff. So they had been around. Carrie says there, why was the letter redacted? You know, obviously, you know, was what's in it that can't be made public knowledge. You know, there was also something else that wasn't mentioned in this. They actually found some DNA, something in the garden that was never mentioned in this video as well, but that never came to light either. That I actually seen that in another video because I've been researching this for a couple of weeks and they actually found something in the garden, but I don't know. It just seemed to. Killian says, but who is the best trained to get rid of the evidence? Who is best trained to get rid of the evidence and stage the scene or lack of the police themselves? Absolutely. Okay, let's carry on. There's only a wee bit left.
The cameras captured intimate, behind the scenes footage of the 151-day investigation from the perspective of the Clarks. The most recent update in the case came in 2021 when it was revealed that Stephen had a girlfriend at the time of his vanishing and that she'd introduced him to her parents days before he disappeared. Neither the Clarks nor the police believed that Stephen's budding relationship had anything to do with his disappearance. The working police theory is that Stephen came to harm and that he didn't simply walk away from his life. There are no suspects in his case. As of 2022, Stephen Clark remains missing and his case unsolved. Charles Clark still keeps an eye out for his son wherever he goes and remains hopeful that Stephen may still be alive. The Clarks refuse to have their son declared dead and have never moved home. 23-year-old Stephen Clark vanished on Monday, December 28, 1992, the bank holiday Monday after Christmas.
Just after Christmas.
His last presumed whereabouts is Saltburn Beach, though he may have headed home in the direction of Marske in Redcar. Stephen was 6 feet tall, with brown hair and blue eyes. He walked with a pronounced limp and had limited use of his left arm. Stephen may have a slight accent, having grown up in South Africa. He was last seen wearing a blue-grey Parker coat, jeans and brown shoes. Crime Stoppers is offering a £10,000 reward in the case. If you have any information, please contact Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'll just take this off here, folks, because it'll start playing again. Just give me 2 seconds here. So what do we say? So there you go, folks. Unbelievable. So many questions unanswered. Why is there so many cover-ups or withholding stuff, Killian says. Carrie says this is wild. It's just unbelievable. It really, really is. Now, let's look at it again. Let's go back right very quickly. Number one, the toilet. We've already went over this. I would have been in there. I'm sorry. I would have been in there. Woman or no woman, as Charlie said there, I would have been in. If I didn't want to go in, I would have got someone to go in. There's another thing that wasn't mentioned as well, folks, as well. That when his mother was standing outside the toilet, there was 2 men and a little girl. And basically, the men went into the toilet one by one, so that one could stay with the little girl outside, because they didn't want to leave the little girl on her own with all the people. So that was one person went in, they came out, and when he came out, then the other one went in. Why did she not say to them? Why did she not say to them? I just find it very, very strange. I don't want to accuse anybody. I don't want to get into trouble. As Carrie says, you don't know where your mind is. You know, you don't know what's going on in your mind. But I just find it very, very strange. So she went home. He wasn't there. And another strange thing which I found as well was that man who said that he had a conversation with Stephen. He says he's seen him. He spoke to him. He's seen his face. And then a matter of time later, he changed his story, saying that he's seen him from a distance. He walked like Stephen, but obviously he really wasn't obviously sure that it was Stephen. So why change your story? Why change your story? This person, this man knew this family. This man was a friend of the family. This is what I find strange. Then the letter, okay? Then the letter came out. And as Carrie said there, why was the letter only parts of it shown. What was not shown? What were we not allowed to see? What were we not allowed to see? That's what I want to know. The DNA that was found in the garden that wasn't actually brought up in this video. There was a small piece of some sort of DNA which they found, but that was never ever mentioned again. What is going on? If you change your story in this day and age, they would say you're guilty. There's something not right about this story. So there's really not. And as I say, I have to say this to keep myself right, that Stephen's parents were cleared of all charges. You know, they were totally cleared. So I can't accuse anybody of anything or whatever. Just to let you know, folks, that I was going to cover another story tonight. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it at the last minute. But I did do a summary of it, and that was of Andrew Gosden, who was the little boy who went to London and was never seen again. The last sighting of him was King's Cross Station. To tell you the truth, Kevin Gosden, who is Andrew's father, was actually going to come and speak to us tonight. But unfortunately, Kevin's not well and he's on antibiotics. But he said in the future that if Andrew's not found, and I hope he is, that he will come and speak to us when he's better. Because I have been in contact with him and he's been a really, really nice man. Could you imagine what he's been going through for all these years? You know, his son was 14 when he went missing. He's never seen him again. That's an interesting one too. If you want to get an idea of that story, I covered that in one of my reactions on the YouTube channel. I actually posted it in the group a couple of weeks ago. It's called the Andrew Gosden story. So maybe in the future we will go back to that when Kevin's better, and Kevin will come and talk to us and tell us what happened that day and what we can do to help him. My heart really goes out to these people. It really, really does. Again, I can't imagine this happening to me. I can't imagine it, or I wouldn't like it happening to any of you. With children, adults, grandparents, anybody. It must be horrible. Carrie says the changing the story doesn't sit right with me. It's as if someone has forced him to change his story. Threat, blackmail. What could make a person change their story to that extent? Um, Especially years later. And Tracy says maybe he did at first to make it look as if he was still about and then felt bad years later. So there you go, folks. You know what I mean? It's horrible. I'm sorry this has been a really sort of dark night tonight, folks, but this is the Chatter House and this is what we do. We try to help wherever we can, and I've never did anything like this before. Yes, most of us are from Northern Ireland, but there's two YouTube channels connected tonight. Someone could play this back and maybe have some information about something. You just don't know. Okay, folks, just before I go, I just want to tell you, next Tuesday night, by popular demand, we're going to do part two of our coach trip because it was such a success the other week that everybody's been asking when I'm going to do another one. So we're going to do another one next week. So that's next Tuesday night. We're doing part two of our coach trip. Another going on our coach trip. And we're going to look at other sites of Northern Ireland that we haven't seen. And I'm hoping this time to get maybe some places that we're not sort of familiar with, like the Giant's Causeway or maybe, just some beauty spots and stuff, something different. So that's going to be part two of the coach trip next week. Carrie says this has been bleak but very interesting and hopefully all those people can be found. Um, and hopefully all those people can be found, even if they have passed. It will offer the families and loved ones the beginnings of closure. Very least. Jackie says the coach trip was brilliant. Catherine says only now as an adult, my brother and me slipped out early in the morning to run away. It must have been awful, Mummy getting up to an empty house. We got as far as as Antrim from Korean before we were found. Sam says, what a night, most interesting. Michelle says, happy birthday and Thursday to our local historians. Our Kai's birthday on Thursday. Happy birthday, Carrie. And Kai says, shush, no. And Sam says, good night. Well, listen, folks, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I know it wasn't the most nicest of subjects, but this is the problem. These things need to be discussed. These things need to be aired to make awareness, because, as I say, you don't know who's listening. So, look, good night from me, and I will see you all very, very soon. And also, don't forget, next Tuesday night, we're going to do another wee part 2 of our coach trip. So, we're going to have to get our Michelle McGrogan, get our driving gloves on again, and get that bus out again. So, look, folks, you all take care of yourselves. And thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm not going to say I hope you enjoyed it, but what I'm going to say is I hope you found it interesting, and I hope I've made you realise what is going on out there. It's very, very scary. Well, look, you all look after yourselves, and I'll see you all very soon. I'll see you later.